President Trump giveth and President Trump taketh away. At least that's what happened to Mark Greenblatt, who was initially hired by President Trump during his first term to serve as a watchdog for the Department of the Interior.
During his tenure, Greenblatt was vocal about what he called cultural problems at Interior and his concerns about that department's ability to disperse large amounts of money.
That still didn't stop him from being fired in last week's purge of more than 15 IGs.
In 2022, Congress passed a law requiring a president to give 30 days notice and specific reasons for removing an inspector general.
This law was passed in response to President Trump's first term when he fired 5 different inspectors general. The law requires a giving of 30 days notice to Congress if you're firing a watchdog. Senators from both sides sent a letter to President Trump demanding an explanation for the most recent firings. Here with us now to tell his side of the story is Mark Greenblatt. Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate your interest.
So I think just the obvious place to start is how this happened, like how you actually learnt that you were being dismissed, and then the broader question of how dangerous you think it is that the new president is getting rid of all these people who, I assume you believe, perform important watchdog functions.
Well, I found out last Friday night, a week ago, around 7:30. I just checked my work phone, as I do periodically over the course of the night, and there was an email from entitled White House notification, and I knew that could not be good. You mentioned the removals of the IGs in the prior administration, the prior Trump administration. Those happened on Friday nights as well. And so to get an email at 7:30 on a Friday night entitled White House notification, your stomach sinks because this is not going to go in a good direction. So open up the email and there's a 2-line message saying, in light of changing priorities, we have, the president has terminated your position as Inspector General effective immediately. Thank you for your service. And that was it.
So what do you think the reason was for him firing you? He obviously appointed you in his first administration. Now apparently is not so keen on having you around anymore. And is the contention more that, not that Trump doesn't have the authority to do this, but that he didn't provide 30 days notice to Congress?
Well, it's multifaceted, frankly. The key issue, yes, the immediate issue is the notice. That is a statutory requirement, and that's not just a technicality. I mean, it is there to provide Congress the opportunity to engage with the president to ensure that there's no sort of improper motive here, that this is an appropriate thing for the American taxpayer. The other issue with respect to the statutory, the requirements there, is that we are a nation of laws. And it is uncomfortable from my perspective, to have certain statutory provisions just sort of dismissed with the wave of a hand, and saying, well, he has the authority to ignore that, therefore he's okay with that's okay with Congress. That to me is troubling. As I said, we're a nation of laws, and this sort of suggests a slippery slope. If he can blow off this provision, what else is out there that what other requirements are there that Congress is not going to enforce? That's a problem from my perspective. The other issue, and perhaps the biggest issue, the most long-term issue, is it does raise questions about the independence of inspectors general going forward. That is the key issue from my perspective, that we need these positions. The American taxpayer deserves to have these positions be independent of mind and spirit, so that they don't have the thumb on the scale for one particular political party or the other, one political ideology or the other. That's the key issue here.
Mark, I think in this debate, obviously people get caught up into the partisan positions one way or another. But for people who aren't aware, what does an Inspector General actually do? And secondly, obviously you had been appointed by President Trump, but that had then worked through the Biden administration, correct? So it's not customary for an Inspector General to only serve one president, and if the party flips, that Inspector General is out, correct?
That's exactly right. So let me start with the first question about what we are and what we do. The IGs are the internal watchdogs inside federal agencies. The way I like to characterize it is that we are the taxpayers' representatives inside the federal government. And we're there to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. We're there to promote economy and efficiency inside the federal government. So it's a crucial role to make sure that the taxpayers are getting what they want, what they deserve from their tax dollars. And that's a key thing. So how does that manifest itself? What we do is we do audits, we do inspections, we do investigations, evaluations, looking at the programs and the operations of the federal agencies to make sure they're living up to the law, that they're spending the money appropriately, that they have the appropriate mechanisms in place to protect taxpayer dollars. In terms of the investigations, we also lead criminal and ethics investigations. These are folks, you can think of us like the FBI, frankly, where we are the law enforcement mechanism inside federal agencies. We look at bribery, we look at embezzlement, we look at all sorts of misconduct from the most senior officers in the departments all the way down to the line level folks out throughout the country and the world. So we are the tip of the spear. We are the knife's edge, whatever analogy you want to use, on the fight against fraud inside the federal government. Now, turning to your second question about the tradition, inspectors general, in order to be credible, inspectors general have to be independent. And that independence, the protections that Congress create this sphere of independence for the IGs. And I mean independence in terms of mind and spirit, so that they can make the findings and have credibility. And so that is an integral part of who we are and what we do. And so in that vein, there has never been a mass firing of IGs like this. Ronald Reagan, with the first transition under the IG Act from Carter to Reagan, Reagan did remove everyone, but there was such a hue and cry, and everyone said, no, these positions were created to spare them from the political winds changing, that he ended up reversing course and brought them back, but about half of them back. So we've never seen this kind of mass firing of IGs with the change of administration. It is truly unprecedented.
Yeah, I mean, another example, this was not a mass firing, but Barack Obama fired Gerald Walpin, Inspector General for the Corporation for National and Community Service, while he was investigating one of Obama's close friends. That's probably the closest example that I could think of. But one thing I wanted to ask you, I'm not big on guilt by association, but I do think it's relevant in this case. You recently appeared on Harry Litman's podcast, and this is a guy who was sort of laughing about the idea that Trump would die in prison and never get to be president again. Do you think that appearing on something like that with somebody who would sort of yuck it up over that kind of serious thing would perhaps play into the perception that Trump is trying to give that you were politically biased?
That's a great question. From my perspective, we are trying to share our message to the world, to everyone and anyone. And I agree with you. I think, comments about anyone's death or hoping for it or laughing about it, not appropriate. I don't like that. I'm not associating myself with any of that. And so it's a totally fair point. My thought is I want to share the message about who we are, what we do, how we add value for the American taxpayer. And I'm willing to talk to anyone, about that because I think it's important. Your question earlier about, well, can you describe for the listeners, what IGs do? That's the kind of thing I'm hoping to amplify our message about the independence of the inspectors general. And so I'm willing to talk to folks, even if I don't agree with what they've said in the past, because I would agree with you. I don't agree with that.
I think, Mark, also there's another couple of ways of looking at this. One is what it says about President Trump's broader approach to governing. And I think from not only the liberal side, but people who are more critical of Trump, they look at things like the clemency, pardons in most cases, commutations in a handful of cases, to the January the 6th, people convicted of January the 6th related offences. They also look at things like the Department of Justice, people being fired from the Department of Justice who had worked on the criminal prosecutions of Trump. So related to that, why do you think he didn't give Congress the 30 days notice that appears to be required by law? And what does that say about his governing mentality?
Well, I've just seen from their statements in the press, the White House said some statement to the effect of, and this is not a perfect quote, but it's pretty close, is that he is the executive branch and he can remove anyone at his pleasure. And so I think he and the White House and the White House counsel's office presumably view their authority, the president's authority within the executive branch, to be effectively limitless. I don't want to speak for them, but certainly in this type of situation where you're talking about employees, they believe they have unfettered discretion or something similar. And again, I don't want to, put words in their mouth, but they believe this is a constitutional issue, and therefore the notice requirement in the IG Act is unconstitutional. That's my assessment from what I've heard from them. And look, that this may get this broader issue of the executive powers, the unitary executive, will likely be litigated over the next few years, and we'll see how that plays out in the courts.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark Greenblatt. We appreciate you joining the program and sharing your perspective on this very thorny issue. We hope you come back.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your interest, and I look forward to seeing your future reporting on it.
Sounds good. All right, up next, is Captain America unpatriotic? We'll find out next.